The Arkansas Traveler. This is a very popular bluegrass old-time tune from, guess where? Arkansas. Dates back to the 1800s. Not much known about the origin of the tune. It's in the key of D major, and it sounds great with lots of Irish-style triplets. If you're one of my valued patrons, the slow tabbed version of this is available. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the form in the tune and maybe even the idea of learning it by ear. Then we're going to pack it full of triplets, ornamentation, some variations and other fun stuff. So make sure you watch until the end. While you're here, hit the like and subscribe button. I keep forgetting to tell you to do that. It makes a big, big difference. And if you have time, let me know how much you like or dislike. Leave a little comment, let me know. So for those watching that are not Irish musicians, this is an Irish mandolin, Celtic style, paddle I think you call it, made in Ireland by a guy called Dave Shapiro. We're going to put in some Irish style triplets, not getting into the controversy of whether it's 3 notes in the space of 2 or 2 16th notes crammed onto the end of, you know, an 8th note or whatever. We're dealing with the spirit of what a triplet is. And the best way to describe the spirit and the feel of a triplet is to describe it and to write it as 3 notes in the space of 2. Whether technically it is or isn't that, I don't really want to get involved in that level of nonsensical pedantry, right? Here's the first part. Little note on the picking. Triplets, 3 notes in the space of 2. Always play them on a down, up, down. And in reels, always play the note after the triplet on a down. So you're going to have down, up, down, down. That keeps you in alternate picking patterns right the way through. Triplets, generally 99.9% of the time, sound best if they're done on the 1 and the 3. So generally there are 2 or 3 different ways to think about triplets. What I call 1-note triplets are done on 1 note played 3 times, and in the 3rd measure of this tune where we have the long notes, I'm going to drop in an open A string triplet. So these are very clearly identifiable single note or 1-note triplets. The other main type of triplets are 3-note or moving triplets. So they're triplets that roll along with the melody. You can put one on the upbeat, the pickup note. So where I like to use these moving or 3-note triplets are to round off the corners of a very rhythmical down, up, down picking pattern, if that makes any sense. So let's play it with no ornamentation whatsoever. Perfectly clean and really, really nice. Now we use the triplets, the moving triplets, to roll in and out of notes. That's the one I like particularly. It's a chromatic 3-note triplet. So here's the second part. I'm going to cram in a bunch of different triplets into this. just for example and effect. Bluegrass players tend not to do that a lot, I think, in my experience of listening. But this is a very Irish way to play a reel, which is to highly augment the tune with lots of ornamentation. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to play the tune slowly or moderately through with a lot of the ornamentation in it, so that maybe you can hear where it falls and have a look at what's happening with the picking. Dying to hear in the comments whether this is an absolute sacrilegious amount of triplets for a bluegrass player to put into a tune. Irish style, pretty normal, pretty common. When it comes to memorizing tunes, it's often important to find the hook, or that moment, the measure, the bar, the corner in the tune that you know, no matter what else happens, you can find that and then you're okay. Sometimes in the middle of a session, if we're playing 3 or 4 tunes in a row and you'll suggest, well, let's go into such and such a reel, you mightn't always be able to remember the first bar in your head, but you'll know that the second bar has a particular note or a particular hook, and you can kind of fluff your way through the first couple of notes aiming for the hook. This Arkansas Traveller on measure 3 has a very easy to spot, easy to remember hook because it's 2 long notes. So no matter what happens in the first couple of bars, you know if you get to that third bar, you're going to be fine. So what does that mean in terms of memorizing a tune? Well, I like to think of it as blocks that you put together. So the first block or the first phrase in the Arkansas Traveller is pretty standard. There's nothing complicated about the mode, the way that the notes travel. So that's very easy for your ear to pick up and to understand where the notes are going. And then we get to the third measure, which is the long open E followed by fret 2. And that couldn't be any easier to remember as a second phrase. Phrase 1. This tune then repeats the first phrase again. And then, if you think about it, the tune is going to dip down on the fourth phrase. And again, that's a very common sort of motif in Irish old-time tunes. So there's nothing hard. And again, you know, memorizing tunes is like learning a language. The more that you do it, the more tunes that you know, the more words from the language that you know, and you're able to make up the sentences. And this is like a series of words. And that appears at the end of lots of different tunes. So that's the first part, 4 easily identifiable phrases. The second part, I'm going to show you what is considered standard. Now that's really common. It's just descending series of notes in threes. Interestingly, the second part has a very strong identifiable measured 3. Again, in its simplest format, long notes. Repeat the first phrase. And we got the tail from the first part. So again, there's almost nothing to learn in terms of new phrases. You got one very easily identifiable. Long notes. Repeat phrase 1. And the first part's ending phrase. And there you have a tune. So I think it can be handy to think about tunes as blocks or phrases. You slot them all together and suddenly you have a tune. In the second part, I prefer a version of the 3-note rundown, which is this. Now there's very little difference in terms of the notes, but there's a very nuanced or subtle difference in the way that the notes are emphasized or push up against each other. So here's the first way, which is open and very, very simple. The second way, it just, because it doubles up certain notes, I find that it kind of compresses the emphasis. There's nothing difficult about either one, only the second one, I think, in terms of the language of a tune or the motifs that you already know in your head, the second one is slightly different. If you've played any amount of Irish or old time or bluegrass tunes, the first one is like really common. It's in loads of hornpipes, it's in loads of reels. The second one is just slightly different, although there's nothing technically difficult. On Patreon, of all of this broken down, you're going to have a slow lesson with just the melody, slow with the ornamentation, single triplets, and then a couple of backing tracks at various speeds, including one that's quite fast, I think, but will help you to play faster. So I hope you've enjoyed this short lesson for the Arkansas Traveller. If you did, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment. If you want to get all the tabs and all the fun stuff, head on over to Patreon. It's Enda Scahill Banjo.